Repel. Reject. Create.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome back to the Rebel, Reject, Create podcast with me, David Chislett. And for this episode, my guest is Fiona Passantino, who's a speaker, trainer, and coach who helps empower working humans with AI integration and strategy. Apart from this, she's also a lifelong creative storyteller who made a long career in corporate communications and HR, and her hobby and high-intensity training house is performing stand-up comedy with an AI twist. Welcome to the show, Fiona.
Thank you. It's great to be here, David. Thank you.
Now, that's a wild cocktail of things.
Yeah, my mother thinks the same.
Right. I kind of get the communications, HR, and stand-up link, but how does AI connect to all of this and why?
Okay. Yeah, great question. I have always been interested in the experience of people at work. I'm a creative, I'm a rebel, probably like you. I find it very hard, have found it very hard to thrive in the corporate space. I've kind of dragged myself through a lot of jobs in the corporate area until finally going out on my own. And I find that you can't talk about engagement at work and joy and inspiration at work if you don't talk about AI. So that's where I came down on it. It so happened that a few years ago I got a master's, I got an MBA because I needed to be, more serious and not just some creative pretending to be in corporate. But that was well before AI became a thing. And I took the MBA with a concentration in AI. So I learned about the theory, about how the thing works, how the brain is put together. The actual theory hasn't changed very much. It's just exploded due to the amount of data that is out there. So I was in a position where I could explain this in kind of easy, simple terms to non-technical people.
Right.
And so it's the speaking career and so on.
Okay. So the core question at this moment for me as a creative, and I'm pretty sure for you as well, is AI creative in the same way that we'd call a human being creative?
Right. Well, I think before we can answer that question, it's good to go one step back and talk about intelligence. So AI works very similarly to the human brain. You have three basic layers of intelligence. You have the algorithm, the parameters, and the weights. All three of them play a role. One is kind of your hard baked in intelligence that gives the instructions. If this, then that. If you see this, then goes to that. Parameters you can compare to our neural networks. So our own nodes where we connect units of information from one part of our brain to the next. For instance, connecting spatial information with technical rote memorization. All brains have these connections, some more than others in some areas. Like I have no math brain, right? It's like totally empty over there. But I have a lot of connections between, for instance, language and spatial and so on. So the more of those nodes that we have, the more intelligent we are. The other layer of intelligence is how much exposure we have to the outside world. So if you lock a child in a closet and you feed them pizza through the mail slot, they're not going to be as smart as a child who spends, time traveling and in different schools and so on. And an AI model works the same way. So we're designing the brain of AI based on our own brain. And it works the same way. It takes information from the outside world. It runs it through these layers, just like we do. And the most interesting thing is the most recent developments, the last version of the model, starting with GPT-4 and going across Gemini and Claude, is they have a structure called the mixture of experts model, which means a query will come in, and instead of it going into a giant large language model and running inference across all those billions of parameters and spitting out your answer, it has 8 narrow, smaller AIs that each have their own form of intelligence. And let's say you have one that's really good at coding, one that's really good at language and poetry and literature, another one that's very good at translation. And then it has a kind of frontal lobe AI that will take the incoming query and redirect it. So you're not running inference across billions of parameters, but maybe millions of parameters. And that will already speed it up and make it perform better. So our brain is now working that way too. So we have this frontal lobe, and it goes, whatever we're dealing with is going to go to certain areas of our brain. So the AI brain is looking more and more like our own, and it's acting more and more like our own. Now, talk about creativity, right? We have this non-human form of intelligence. So that's what we're calling it. It's intelligence, but it's a non-human form of that. Creativity and emotions are part of intelligence. It's a unit of our own intelligence. So if we're already dealing with non-human intelligence, we can't not deal with non-human creativity, non-human emotional mimicry. We're still calling it mimicry because for now we're still in a gray zone, but I'm going to go as far to say that we're going to soon be dealing with a non-human emotional world as well.
Wow. I mean, I'm just thinking back to all the sci-fi I've read over the years, and this whole idea that any kind of sentient machine is never going to be able to experience emotions.
That's how, yeah.
And you're saying it's going to happen?
I'm saying that who are we to judge? Like, how do we know? Like, I can say that my cat has an emotional life. My
gotcha.
my cat shows me love, really, like sometimes too much. My cat is scared. My cat has anticipation, feelings of, let's say anxiety when he sees me going away on a trip. So there's no doubt in my mind that my cat experiences an emotional life.
Yeah.
My cat also has intelligence. My cat maybe not have creativity. I don't know. It's easier to see emotions in animals than creativity. So to me, the link between emotions and intelligence is an easier one to make than creativity, because creativity is a higher, let's say, order. You see chimpanzees being creative in their work. They actually do artwork. You see even elephants make artwork. So it is all a kind of a scale, and we humans, we are animals. We like to think of ourselves as special, but how special are we? The more studies that they find about emotions is that emotions is actually a signal that we need to change our behavior based on incoming data and input. So let's say we get the input into our eyes that there's a tiger coming at us. That causes us, we need as a species, as a person trying to protect themselves, we need to run or we need to fight. And in order to do that, we go to the amygdala, the emotional part of our brain, to release a chemical to enable us to get that adrenaline rush so we can run away. Right. That is just a chemical process that's going through the brain. We call it emotions because it's somehow special. It feels different from cognitive thought. But in fact, it is just a straighter version of cognitive thought that is chemically induced.
Yes. In fact, I've seen emotions described as shortcuts.
Yes, that's exactly what they are. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
If we're designing an AI brain to have these different layers, and we have a frontal lobe, and we have this kind of amygdala, which is in the algorithmic baseline of the code, where is there no emotion? I mean, how do we say that we're building it out of it?
Well, is that not, oh God, and can I say this word, anthropomorphization? Because, my cat isn't really angry with me when I leave. He's probably quite relieved so he can go and kill stuff in the garden. Are we not in danger of just projecting our own human experience onto these things with no real way of knowing whether that is true or not?
That works in the reverse as well. We have no way of proving it, and we have no way of disproving it. And I think I can't prove that my cat feels love. I feel him loving me, let's say. That could be my human, projection, of course, but it could also not be. And so I can't, unless I'm in his little body and brain, I can't really feel what he feels. And the same with AI, actually.
Right. So my neighbor's ginger cat is figuring out how to open the chip-controlled cat flap.
Nice.
Is he smart or is he creative?
I would say creativity is an expression of intelligence. Sure.
Thank you.
Where's
I
the
love
line
that.
where's the line between where does intelligence stop and creativity begin? Right. I think if you have a high enough level of intelligence, it's going to pass into that creative zone.
Whether you're talking about a machine, an algorithm, or a furball.
Or an animal. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Okay. So right now, which is it, do you think? I mean, are we at a stage where AI is exhibiting creativity on a large scale, or is it more like little c creativity?
Well, I sent you some images, which might be nice to show here. These are all images that didn't exist before, that are built based on a form of intelligence that is non-human, that is taking in information, assimilating all of it, and recreating something new that's never existed before. Okay. Now, when we humans, when we artists make art, what we are doing is we are looking around our world, we are seeing what we see, we are assimilating all the data that we're exposed to, and we're creating something new. When the cubists got together, you know how you have this group of cubists, right? And you had Picasso, and you had Braque, and you had, I think even Chagall was part of that group. They all went to the same bars together. They all hung out drinking together. They all had the same girlfriends, kind of passed them around. And they all spent a lot of time together, partying and drinking and so on. Now they influence, there's no question that they influence each other. And they together as a group became the cubists. And they got into terrible fights. I'm the real cubist. All of you are just copying me. Yeah. Picasso even said himself, good artists borrow and great artists steal. So creativity, how much of our creative expression is 100% created in a vacuum, our idea? And I will even go so far to say none of it. Yeah. Every creative act is an assimilation of what we've seen. If you were to lock that child back up in the basement and you feed him pizza again, how creative is he going to be? Because he's only exposed to darkness and the taste of pizza, right? So you become more creative the more exposure you have to the outside world.
Right.
We see AI doing the same thing.
So that implies, therefore, that we need to be thinking quite carefully about what we actually mean when we use the word creativity. What is the definition that we're operating under?
I think that's a good one. I think it's good to really just define what, I mean, how do you see creativity? Do you have a definition of it?
Well, no. I mean, since the Second World War, psychologists and neurologists have been proposing and refining and arguing about this. And as far as I can tell, nobody is in much agreement. It's got something to do with novelty. It's got something to do with originality. It's got something to do with value. But there is no accepted final definition of what creativity actually is. We have a lot of information about how it works, the circumstances, the processes, the outcomes, but what it actually is, a definition of it, as far as I can tell, is not agreed.
It's one of these things where you know it when you see it.
Right. Well, one of the terms that I've heard used, and I think this is quite interesting in terms of the debate around intelligence and AI, is that creativity is an emergent property.
Okay. Yeah. GTB just gave me an answer. I asked, what is your definition of creativity? And it said, creativity is the ability to generate new original ideas or approaches by combining existing knowledge, experiences, and perspectives in innovative ways. And creativity often leads to the creation of something novel. I don't see in this definition where AI is not part of that.
No, I mean, that looks very much to me like you average Joe at home who needs to fix something, doesn't have the tools, and makes a plan. So on that everyday level, it's very hard to say that AI is not creative.
Yeah.
But what about Einstein? What about E equals MC squared? I mean, I don't think many people are used to thinking of physicists as being creative, but he had to come up with the theorem and then figure out how to prove it. Are we anywhere near that level of creative conceptual thinking?
Well, I think creativity is in all sectors. So coders are extremely creative when they are writing code. Mathematicians are incredibly creative when they try to find the next, theorem. Astronomers, I mean, all of what we do, cooks are creative when they go. Yeah. It's very, I think writers, there's really no teachers can be incredibly creative, even CEOs, business people, their creative solutions. So yeah, I mean, I don't see any real dividing line. I think if you're able to have some new ideas, that already puts you in that creative zone.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I tend to say that everybody is creative because everybody can solve problems. What makes one person seem more creative than the other is the skills and information they have in order to put through that problem-solving capacity.
Right. Yeah. The extent to which they're able to generate new things that people haven't seen before. That's right. But if you
Right.
really break that new thing down, how new is it? Like what percentage is new?
Yeah.
Right. So even Einstein, his things, his theorem is not 100% his own either. He also
Ah,
had students who helped him out with looking at research and so on. And he was building on the shoulders of those who came before him as well.
yeah. Yeah. Are we moving to a point where the whole notion of human intelligence and quite possibly human creativity is going to be forced to change under this kind of collaboration with machine-based intelligence or non-human intelligence?
Well, we found that every time we have technological advances, we've had to adapt. So let's say the printing press had caused us to change how we communicate, and the plow caused us to put our oxen away. The camera caused us to change how we depict the world. So it freed us to become more abstract and so on. And I believe we have a very big jump in our technology. We're so lucky to live in this time that we get to see this enormous new evolutionary step that we're making as humans here, and we're going to have to adapt. I think
Big time.
we're going to have to find new areas where humans can really complement an AI, and I'm hopeful that it will allow us to do more of the things that we love to do and that we're good at, and allow us to be more physically present with each other, which is where we excel, and allow AI to take on the things that are very necessary and needed, but things that we don't like to do and don't do very well.
Right. All the dog jobs that no human being really, for this sense of dignity, actually wants to do.
Correct. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Okay.
But having said that, I have this artist friend who said, when I started out with I thought that AI would do my taxes and my forms, and I would have more, or my ironing, and I would have more time to do my art. But now it's kind of like my AI is doing my art, and I'm doing the laundry. So.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I suppose one would have to argue that maybe your ideas about your art then need to change
Exactly.
rather than doing the laundry. But any last thoughts for us, Fiona, about
Sure.
this conundrum, this relationship between AI and creativity?
Yeah. Well, I guide creatives a lot in this process because there's quite a bit of anxiety here.
Hmm.
And there's a huge feeling of loss. I just published an article about this kind of feeling of loss that we're experiencing as creatives. And there are a couple directions we can go. We can either we double down on the human. So we do things that require a physical human experience, like sculpture, like creating, interactive experiences, creating experiences that have to be seen and exhibited live. Or we have to kind of change our way of thinking or integrate it into our artwork. My own example, I do comic books for executives. That's what I do. And for many years, I would do square by square by square by hand. It was an excruciating process, the little windows of all the buildings and so on. And now I use AI to help me with the backgrounds
Yeah.
and the repetitive scenes. So I don't have to reinvent the wheel every single time. And
Yeah.
because for me, it's important, the storytelling aspect. I don't care about every single window is drawn by hand. I draw the characters and the scenarios on top of layers of AI. I also manipulate the AI generation, so I make it all my own, and then the end result is my own. But unfortunately, when a publisher hears how you're working, they don't want to touch you. And I think that world might have to very much realize that things are going to be different now. I think we're all going to be using AI.
Yes, copyright.
That's right.
Like our whole notion of the right to reserve your right to copy. Yeah, because none of this is possible if the current really strict definitions of copyright and intellectual property rights are upheld.
That's right. All our laws are in place in a world designed to litigate when 100% of the creative work was done by humans. We don't have a legal structure in place to deal with this kind of hybrid creative output or even 100% AI output. We don't have the tools for that yet, and it's going to take a while for it to catch up. Yeah. But I would even go as far to say that how much of your work, let's say you write a book, how much of that is really 100% your work, or how much have you kind of lifted from others or been influenced by others? It's always been hard to really say what is yours and what is not.
Nearly impossible. I mean, so much of that stuff is subliminal, it goes so far back into your experience that you may not even consciously be aware of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Fiona, thank you so much for chatting to me today. It's been really enlightening and interesting, right? So score 1 for AI being creative after this.
So do you have an opinion now, or are you still on the fence?
Well, I guess I when it comes to the standard joining the dots solving problems, I've used AI a lot, and it definitely spits out answers that I hadn't thought of that I can see are legit. I'm just curious as to when we get into what people might call high creativity, whether it has, those 3 networks to the extent required in order to come up with really mind-blowing, original, different stuff. That I just don't think the computing power is there for that yet, apart from anything else.
So you're saying it's a matter of time?
I reckon so. And what happens next is where it's going to get very interesting.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question that we're on the road to AGI, artificial general intelligence, and then eventually artificial superintelligence. That's what all the bros out there in Silicon Valley are working really hard to build. And it's just an engineering problem at this point. It's the compute, it's the energy, it's the design, the architecture, but we're going to get there.
Yeah, but then I'm going to get all black swan on you and say just because everybody expecting it, that's the least guarantee that it's going to happen.
Okay, well, let's. I don't know where I stand on that one. I do lose sleep about it as well. But it's good to prepare for a very different kind of world, and then the next 5-10 years.
Awesome, Fiona. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, David. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for listening. If you want to find out more about Fiona and her work, all of her links and social and what are in the show notes underneath this episode. So please go and check that out and follow her so you can find out more. Until next time, rebel, reject, so you can create.